The Olympic and Paralympic Games. All of those elite athletes competing to see who was the only one deserving the glory of a gold medal. Even though, you know, these athletes actually compete all the time, and the ones who don't get medals are also elite athletes. The swimming, the fencing, the mental gymnastics of using the argument of protecting women in sports to attack queer athletes and people with non-normative bodies. Wait, what? Yes, we're not actually talking about the Paralympics. Sorry. It was a clever trick. Even though there is no scientific evidence that trans athletes have an advantage when competing against cis ones, the Paris Olympics had increased restrictions on transgender women for at least 10 sports. Some sports specifically banning them from competition if they had not transitioned before the age of 12, which is definitely something that those 11-year-olds had a say in, and not at all a point in their life when their medical decisions were being made by their parents. So sure, let's blame the kids now they're older for having been powerless back then. And pray tell, how are we squaring that up with both the UK and several states in the US banning or trying to ban puberty blockers for trans children? Paralympics are allowing individual sports to make their own decisions regarding trans women, though many of the sports share the same governing bodies as their Olympic counterparts. So for instance, cycling is restricted in both the Olympics and the Paralympics. And yes, there are transgender Paralympic athletes, like Italian visually impaired runner Valentina Perillo, or non-binary wheelchair racer Robin Lambert, who was the first non-binary or trans athlete to win a Paralympic medal at the Tokyo 2020 Games in 2021. The policing of women's bodies in sports affects negatively both trans and cis women, as well as, frankly, people of other genders, but we often hear about it being defended in terms of protecting women and saving women's sports. If it's about physical ability, why did the International Chess Federation ban trans women from women's chess? I'm just dying to hear your reasoning. Oh, wait. Oh, I'm deaf. I'll live. Olympic champion gold medalist Algerian boxer Imane Khelif faced backlash all the way from the quarterfinals, where she beat Italian boxer Angela Carini in 46 seconds, to her final gold medal win in the female welterweight category and beyond. In posts on X, Rowling described the boxing match as a male punching a female. Musk shared a post saying, "Men don't belong in women's sports," and Trump posted a photo of the fight writing, "I will keep men out of women's sports." Well, they already are, so I guess Kamala's got it covered. Despite being born female and not identifying as transgender or intersex, and being backed by the International Olympic Committee, who had to actually come out and assert that scientifically this is not a man fighting a woman, Khelif faced a torrent of accusations and abuse over her gender. Because, you know, racism. Just say racism. Khelif had been disqualified in 2023 by the International Boxing Association, as she, as well as the Taiwanese boxer Lin Yuting, did not pass a gender test. But no one actually knows what the test was, including the people who supposedly carried it out. Was it hormone levels? Was it chromosomes? Was it whatever needed to let the IBA's preferred athlete win? The IBA was stripped of its status as amateur boxing's governing body in 2019, and the IOC cleared both athletes to participate in the Olympics. All in the name of protecting women in sports. I guess just not women who are too good at sports, and not from your country. So, Imane has filed a lawsuit against Elon Musk, J.K. Rowling and others, Donald Trump, for alleged cyber harassment. I say alleged for legal reasons, but we all saw it. It was online. The lawsuit was filed in France and accuses the individuals of fueling a misogynist, racist and sexist campaign against her. It seeks to hold those responsible accountable for their actions and to protect Khelif's dignity and honour. Her parents even shared with the press pictures of her birth certificate and of Imane wearing a dress as a child in order to prove she was raised as a girl, which frankly seems really quite unnecessary and should make everyone who is transvestigating this woman feel ashamed. So we all know that road rage can be a dangerous thing, both if you're the driver getting worked up and if you're the one being yelled at over a steering wheel. But did you know that in the United States there are now websites that allow the person you really annoyed by hesitating just a moment too long at the junction to look up your number plate, find out where you live and come find you at home? Yes, the internet, constantly finding new ways to terrify us. They're called people search sites, and they're a huge data privacy problem. Your home address, contact details, license plate numbers, family members, financial information, and even religious and political beliefs are available for any identity thief, scammer, or even a stalker to get their hands on. So I signed up to Ange-Marie to get my information taken down, and I was shocked when it showed me all of the personal details that have been scraped from me in the last 2 decades I had been making my way across the web. And I really knew nothing about turning on data protection as a teenager. But whilst people search sites are US specific, our personal data being sold affects us all. I have run out of fingers on which to count how many companies have contacted me in just the last 6 months to say, oh whoops, we've had a data breach. Your information is out there. Because yes, the data being collected can include data on your children, despite the laws against collecting the data of minors. Which is why I am delighted that Ange-Marie have not only come to sponsor today's video, but are also giving all of you 60% off an annual plan when you go to ange-marie.com/Jessica and use code Jessica. It's incredibly easy. Simply create an account, tell them whose personal data they'll be removing, then give them the right to work for you so they can contact data brokers on your behalf. They will then request the removal of all of your data and deal with any objections from the data brokers. Plus, since many data brokers just continue collecting your personal data even after they've removed it, Ange-Marie will then automatically take care of any new records about you that pop up on data broker sites. That's why the annual plan is such a great thing to have. Honestly, the thing that bothers me the most is learning that data brokers sell bulk data to companies specifically targeting vulnerable and disadvantaged groups via lists with stupid names like Tough Start, Young Single Parents, or Ethnic Second City Strugglers. Because sure, what we need is more discrimination. In 2022 and 2021, 3 data brokerages were even charged with conspiracy to commit mail and wire fraud for intentionally supplying data lists of elderly and vulnerable people to scammers. Don't let your personal information fall into the wrong hands. Let's be honest, none of us have the time and the energy to contact each of the data brokers out there and insist they dump our details, so just leave it to Ange-Marie. Click the link in the description and sign up today at ange-marie.com/Jessica using code Jessica for 60% off an annual plan. Keep yourself safe, keep your family safe, and stay vigilant online. Content warning for hateful terms, phrases, and imagery. What is a transvestigation? Yeah, so this bizarre hate-driven conspiracy theory emerged in early 2017 and has had a resurgence as a kind of anti-trans trope in the last 18 months. The practice maliciously targets prominent cisgender public figures, from Taylor Swift to Serena Williams to The Rock to Kyle Rittenhouse. Okay, didn't see that one coming. Very much turning on their own there. Then investigates them using gendered pseudoscience, strange graphics, and lots of all caps admonitions to their audiences to wake up. The underlying notion is that being transgender is not only incredibly more prevalent than statistics would have us believe, but also that it is in some way wrong or deviant, a shameful secret to be concealed. Notably, transvestigation is an example of how transphobic hate impacts everyone, as the targets of the harassment are cisgender people. Of course, the theory is not infrequently racist, as it turns its eye particularly onto women of colour, particularly black women. Oh, I'm so sorry, Mum. And of course, these people will find a way to make it anti-Semitic. It's the Jewish cabal secretly filling prominent roles in society with transgender people. To which we can only say, why? Pourquoi? To what end? Answer yet to be given. Content related to this form of anti-transgender hate runs rampant across all social media platforms in many forms, including crowdsourced Facebook groups, lots of Facebook, individual posts like this one targeting Jennifer Aniston, and YouTube playlist compilations. Are your shoulders broader than your hips? Secretly a man. Do you have a broad jaw? Definitely a man. Are your eyes far apart? Oop, you're a woman now. Wait, what if you have all 3? Come back to me on that. Although the transvestigation trope is not expressly identified as hate speech by social media platforms, why? Experts on anti-LGBTQ+ hate and disinformation, including GLAAD, are clear that such dehumanizing attacks on people's bodies and identities are a harmful form of bullying and harassment. Shocker. This is an attempt to weaponize one group's fear of losing their rights in order to turn it against another group, and also towards itself, ultimately hurting everyone in the process. All women, trans and cisgender, suffer from the over-policing of what a woman's body should be like. When the stakes of a group having rights are described as a catastrophe for a different group, or when we say, that's irrelevant. We should be focusing on this issue instead. That is what we call Oppression Olympics. See what I did there? Yeah, sorry, I know, I do know it's the Paralympics now, but Oppression Paralympics, it just doesn't have the same ring to it. Weirdly, in a way that is not at all weird, comparing and fighting over who needs and deserves support is, bad for everyone. Oh no! What? The council don't have funds for the table tennis club anymore? Or because they spent money on that big public debate about whether the women's climbing team should allow trans women or paraplegic women, which doesn't really feel like the same thing. And how about you deserve support and help, whether also other people deserve it or not? It turns out no one is getting the gold at the Oppression Olympics. The only way to win is not to play. So trigger warning for, I was going to say trigger warning for transphobia, but to be honest at this point it's just a trigger warning for J.K. Rowling. Trigger warning for J.K. Rowling and transphobia. Let's set the track and go! I know sports. Who plays the game? Oppression Olympics and Intersectionality. Oppression Olympics is the idea that marginalised or underrepresented groups fight one another in order to determine which group has the worst experience of oppression and marginalisation, and in turn, which one deserves the most support. The term was probably used for the first time in 1993 by Elizabeth Petita Martinez, a Chicana feminist activist, to discuss the need to employ mutual support when creating coalitions between people of colour of different backgrounds. When asked in conversation with Angela Davis, how can different people of colour come together to build a coalition when their communities have different needs? Martinez replied, we have to reject any hierarchy of needs of different communities. The whole idea of making a hierarchy of demands is sure death from the beginning. We cannot be trapped in arguing about my need is greater than yours, or a women's centre is more important than a Latino cultural centre, or whatever. We have to fight together because there's a common enemy, especially if you're up against an administration being divisive. I think everybody has to come together and form an alliance or a set of goals together. But the general idea is no competition of hierarchies should prevail. No oppression Olympics. So from the very beginning, the term was used in order to denounce infighting and encourage different activist groups to band together, as opposed to attacking each other. Because it doesn't matter if one's part of a feminist organisation, an anti-racist group, or an LGBTQ+ club. It serves everyone's interest to help each other achieve our own goals. This is in part because making sure that one group has rights is beneficial for the rights of everyone, but also because there are no clear boundaries between different minority groups. People who may benefit from some of the things demanded by one organisation may also have interests that are tied to a different one. Because, people are more than one thing. I'm an Aquarius, but also a wood dragon. People are so complex. Now, you may have heard this term before, but this is what we call intersectionality. The idea that one's identity cannot be defined by one label, but that it's made up of all the different things that intersect to make one's experience. Even though this is an idea that was already in existence before, it was more clearly described in the late 1980s by black feminists like Kimberly Williams Crenshaw and Patricia Hill Collins. One can read intersectionality to mean that personhood or identity can be separated out into discrete social parts. For example, race can be separated from gender. This is because the notion that two things intersect brings readily to mind a Venn diagram. Intersectionality theory is the understanding that race and gender are interconnected, and as a result, they do not exist as disengaged identities. In other words, there are non-intersecting areas in the diagram. It's obviously important to note that this concept comes specifically from discussions in academia and activism about feminism and race, but it also works for every aspect of one's identity, like sexuality, disability, religion, etc. Let's be honest, I don't take off my disabled hat to put on my lesbian hat. I don't have the energy for that. The fact that I'm disabled affects the way in which I live my sexuality, and the way in which I live my sexuality affects the way I live my disability. And this also applies to other aspects of life, right? I don't take off my British hat or my mother hat in order to do something else. All of these things are just a part of my identity, and I live all of them together. I'm just a multi-layered individual. What can I say? That's what intersectionality means, taking into account that there is not a single experience of being a woman or disabled or black. It's just an approach that tries to fight for rights and needs in a way that are inclusive of all the different ways in which people in a group can see their identity affected by forces outside of and inside of themselves, and giving space to people with different experiences from our own to speak up about them. When you set groups against each other, first of all, you're working from the perspective that each minority group is made up of people with the same experiences of oppression and privilege. And this always ends up crashing against real life, where people just have complex experiences of who they are. Are trans people more oppressed than lesbian? Do people of colour deserve more support than disabled people? Don't worry, this is a trick question. The answer to that is another question. Which trans people and which lesbians? Which people of colour? Which disabled people? Some people can be all these things at the same time, and they can't separate the parts of themselves into different needs. Do I feel foggy and anxious right now because my ADHD meds are wearing off? Or because my connective tissue disability is making my chronic pain bad? Or maybe it's because that man over there with the no gaze allowed sign is really staring directly at me. Hello? The idea that some needs are more important than others also makes us suspicious of people who are in positions of disempowerment when they express they are having issues. Why are you complaining about not getting enough help with your dyslexia at school when they've already given you a fancy computer? Timmy has to drag himself up 5 flights of stairs to the science lab on his crutches every day, and he's not complaining. Why are you trying to win the Oppression Olympics? When people accuse others of playing Oppression Olympics because they are complaining about a specific issue that affects them as a group, they forget that the term was invented precisely to describe the thing they are doing. Saying, "Stop complaining about racism where there isn't any, you're damaging the cause," is forgetting that the cause is making sure everyone's rights are respected and everyone has access to the support that they need. Speaking up about your needs is not playing Oppression Olympics, but we sometimes forget that because it's hard to remember that when other people have space to ask for better conditions, that doesn't mean our needs suddenly become unimportant, or that they're going to be using up all of the good help stuff. Because we're scared that if someone else's pain or suffering is being discussed, that means we're the ones whose problems are going to be irrelevant. I have good news for you. That is not how this works. The idea, subconscious or not, that only one group or only one kind of people deserve to get support turns people against each other in a way that prevents us from focusing on common goals and instead turns our efforts to hurting people with different experiences than ourselves. Intersectionality is important because usually when people say X minority group has privilege, they're often thinking of a portion of that group that looks like an image in their head that may or may not have much to do with the actual lived experience. Oppression Olympics in the LGBTQ+ community. Perhaps one of the most glaring current examples of pitching people within a group against each other is the attempt to separate the LGB from the T and the Q. Weird, right-wing gays who are voting for the Leopards Eating Faces party. What are you doing? Oddly enough, that isn't the only example. For instance, sometimes people say that bisexual or pansexual people have straight passing privilege because when they're dating someone of the opposite sex, they may appear to not be members of the LGBTQ+ community. Oh, which means they don't suffer from the level of discrimination that a gay man or a lesbian might? Although this idea assumes that when we say bisexual, we are thinking of someone who looks like they're straight and cisgender, but of course many bisexual people are also transgender or gender non-conforming or visibly queer, regardless of what kind of relationship they're in, or even if they're not in a relationship, and that our gays read as gay to everyone around them. At the same time, this idea assumes that not being open about one's identity is a form of privilege, when the very need to ever have to pass as straight, regardless of one's sexuality, is in itself an indication of the general queer phobia LGBTQ+ people face. According to a Stonewall 2018 study, 30% of bisexual men and 8% of bisexual women in the UK felt like they could not be open about their sexual orientation, as opposed to 2% and 1% of people identifying as gay and lesbian respectively. Research also suggests that bisexual individuals suffer higher rates of poor mental health than both gay, lesbian and heterosexual people. But don't worry, people who identify as gay or lesbian still have a higher risk of depression and anxiety disorders than heterosexual people. Well, there just have to be some downs to go the ups of being this fabulous. Because of the minority stress caused by the danger of violence, discrimination, microaggressions, and general stigma social minorities face. Oof. And yes, minority stress also affects asexual individuals. And that is precisely the point. It doesn't matter who's having a worse time, when actually everyone would benefit from the same changes. It honestly sounds so petty as an argument. Mum said it's my time with discrimination. There really is no competition to be had. access to mental health support, a decrease of stigma around non-normative sexuality, gender expression and attachment models would benefit all LGBTQ+ people and heterosexual people alike. Similarly, trans people having better access to rights and safety does not hurt other members of the LGBTQ+ community. Now, sure, you may have heard transphobes and people who are well-intentioned but not well-informed say that allowing trans women into certain queer spaces is erasing lesbians by forcing them to share spaces with men. I'm not going to go through all of the transphobic things J.K. Rowling has tweeted, retweeted or supported in the past few years. We don't have time. We don't have time. It'd be a whole video in itself. But hey, in a world where trans people in the UK are waiting for up to 7 years for an initial gender assessment by the NHS, puberty blockers for minors with gender dysphoria have been fully banned, and anti-trans crime has risen 11% in 1 year and 186% in the 5 years before, perhaps we can all agree that trans people are not living the deluxe experience of privilege. So, when J.K. Rowling tweets that, and again, so sorry to bring her up, just so sorry. Straight, cross-dressing men are being pandered to. She is first of all saying a horrifically transphobic thing, obviously, but also she's falling into that same error of thinking that every person in a group is the same kind of person, that every trans person was assigned male at birth and is interested in women. And so, she is using fear-mongering about women being threatened in order to protest greater rights and protections for someone else. Also, it's incredibly ironic that Rowling attacked Emaine Cleef and called her a man for being able to win a match at the Olympic sport she's trained in since her teens, because according to Cleef, the reason she got into boxing in the first place was that she had to get good at dodging the punches of the boys who didn't want her to play football with them because they didn't like that she was a girl trying to play sports. Because, you know, she spent her childhood as a girl, Joanne, because she was born female in a country where being transgender is illegal. How? Why would Algeria send a trans woman to the Olympics when they don't allow trans women at all? A question none of the right-wing pundits apparently considered. Rowling tweeted that this woman, who is a UNICEF national ambassador, who said before the Olympics that she wanted to win a gold medal to inspire disadvantaged girls and children in Algeria follow their dreams, has the smirk of a male protected by a misogynistic establishment. Sorry, which women are you protecting here? It's not Emaine, but it's also not even Angela Carini, who lost that viral match, but said she hoped Cleef carried on till the end. God, maybe you should listen to women, Joanne. My gosh. Emaine Cleef's lawyer has stated both Elon Musk and J.K. Rowling are mentioned in the cyberbullying lawsuit she's filing in response to the online attack she suffered. And, you know, personally, I hope she sues the pants off them and gets very rich out of this horrible experience she's had. Also, yay that she won a gold medal. Excited for the day Elon's no longer a billionaire. But it sounds extremely unlikely either of them are going to see any consequences from their online harassment of people who don't follow their narrow world views. Yes, we can all hope for a better world, and really we should. It's also just ironic that the sort of anti-trans, anti-women brigade often tries to enlist the LGBT community to support these arguments. Arguments very similar to the ones employed to justify lesbians and gay men being harassed, attacked and arrested in toilets in the 60s and 70s. You mean the other type of rainbow people weren't allowed in toilets either? The danger of unisex toilets being a breeding ground for assault was actually used in the 1970s to stop a constitutional amendment against gender discrimination. I know! Oh, an amendment stopping gender discrimination. What a clearly terrible thing. An amendment that would have guaranteed the constitutional protection of equal rights for women was stopped because people thought equal rights would lead to people using the same toilet. Oh no! The queue to the women's toilets might be too long, and then they'd use the men's. So maybe that's a good thing to remember next time someone tells you trans rights infringe upon women's rights. Also, maybe remember this infamous article published by the BBC in 2021 that talked about lesbians feeling pressured and shamed into dating trans women. An article that was extensively protested and has been updated with a series of amendments, including the following. Since publication of this article, the BBC's Executive Complaints Unit has also ruled that the original article did not go far enough to make clear to readers the survey's lack of statistical validity. I honestly just kind of find funny to have to say that your article wasn't clear enough about the fact that it wasn't trustworthy. Actually, cis lesbians and bisexual women in the UK show more support for transgender people than the general population. According to a 2023 YouGov survey, 66% of bisexual women and 68% of lesbians have a very positive view of trans people, compared to 22% of all Britons. These attempts to break apart the community have spurred the creation of groups like the LGB Alliance, who claim to serve the interests of lesbians, gay men and bisexuals whilst opposing trans rights. But the fact that it's coming from a place of anti-transness very easily shows how little this position serves the interests of their members themselves. When the Russian government declared the LGBTQ+ community a terrorist group last year, the LGB Alliance tweeted its support for the LGB and trans people in Russia and were responded to by a barrage of angry tweets complaining that trans people have been mentioned at all. How dare they? Even though they are absolutely targeted by this law, because all LGBT people are. Because the leopards you voted for have now come to eat your face. But a big part of the followers of the LGB Alliance were more concerned with the fact that the oppression of trans people had been mentioned than with the fact that lesbian, gay and bisexual people were also being attacked. Some tweets even defended the law. And yes, I understand X is anonymous and full of people with bad takes. I will not say every person who follows the LGB Alliance would rather lose their rights than let trans people be happy and safe, but that number is not zero. Division within the LGBT community hurts everyone, because this kind of attitude focuses our efforts on hating those perceived as receiving more support than on fighting for societal behaviours and legal changes that would benefit all of us. One of the reasons why people with sexualities and genders that do not follow the norm band together to fight for our rights is that we tend to be attacked by the same groups, and so we benefit from supporting each other when that happens. It's no surprise at all that the people who actively are trying to pass laws to prevent trans people from being able to transition legally, receive healthcare and use toilets in public in the States are also wanting to ban talk of sexual orientation in schools and are actively proposing banning same-sex marriage. Oh, sorry to maintain a biblically based social science reinforced definition of marriage and family. Look, we're all just trying to live our lives here. Each type of marginalised identity has its own unique history and lived experience and unique intersections with others. Attempting to play us off against each other is ridiculous. Oppression Olympics and you. Everyone deserves to live a livable life and everyone deserves support. But one of the things this kind of argument tends to play off of is the fact that it's often hard to believe, even at a personal level, that you don't have to prove why you're struggling when you're having a hard time. It's easy to fall into the fallacy that other people expressing their discomfort means they're the only ones who get to do that, because it's hard to remember that we're trying to do is to make sure that as many people as possible are able to live their lives with dignity, care and support, not to just give rights to the ones who deserve them. Trying to determine who is having the worst time instead of supporting each other and taking care of ourselves is a barrier to solidarity. It's like how you have a friend who only knows how to show support by talking about things that are going wrong in their life, and it feels a bit annoying because surely that means your problems are not as important, or even though they are trying to say that they understand that you're upset and that they feel like their smaller problem, I guess, is kind of as big as your bigger problem, or their bigger problem is the same as your smaller problem. Wait, whose problem is bigger now? This is very confusing. No? Is it just me who has that friend? Look, your friend telling you their problems doesn't mean your problem's not important anymore. It just means you both have problems. And also they maybe need to be more aware of your feelings. When someone tells us about how they're struggling in a different way than us, it's sometimes hard not to hear that as an indication that maybe we're not the ones who are suffering, because it's easy to internalise the idea that only those who are having an actually bad time deserve to be helped or to be listened to. And sometimes this actually leads us to believe we do not deserve help ourselves. It's also very easy to think your pain is not that important because it's your pain. So no matter how big it is, it may feel like other people's pain is more deserving of care. It matters to us when someone else is suffering, but we don't always remember to give ourselves the same grace we give other people. I know this happens to me as well. I was in terrible pain for literal months because I have a pillow I was using, and it did not occur to me to try to fix it. Don't we all wake up with horrible neck pain from uncomfortable pillows? Until Claudia was like, why don't you just buy a new pillow. Instant improvement, highly recommend. Unnecessary pain, gone. But it just didn't occur to me to try to fix it because it was my pain. And it feels like that's not what needs fixing. It's other people having problems that deserve to be fixed, right? But that's not how it works. Just like your pain doesn't cancel out other people's pain doesn't cancel out yours. I guess those are the indoor oppression Olympics. Indoor 500 metre self-denial relay race. But you're the only one doing the relaying because there's no mutual support. I'm really stretching this metaphor now. Insert stretching before the race joke. You may feel that when people around you are suffering, that they're more deserving or of care and that your problems are not actually that important. But this is called comparative suffering, and it can lead to resentment and bitterness, also just to guilt of having the negative feeling in the first place. It doesn't only apply to negative emotions or experiences. Generally speaking, feeling that our worth is comparative to others based on how much they do has a negative effect on your quality of life. Some studies have found that comparing oneself to others we perceive to be more productive in the place of employment can lead to greater degrees of burnout. I know that some people actually do believe that you should always be happy and grateful, because there is always someone who is suffering more than you are. But no, actually, you don't need to feel guilty for having an emotional reaction to having bad things happen to you, or to things being difficult. You don't need to feel guilty for being overwhelmed, or stressed, or sad, or in pain. You do not choose the emotions you have, but you are having them for a reason. And it's important that you listen to them and you give yourself the same grace you would give others. Because the truth is, you don't have to prove that you are worthy of receiving care. Because in the words of Elizabeth Martinez, we cannot be trapped in arguing, my need is greater than yours. No oppression Olympics. A friend told me she once read that pain is like air in a balloon. And I tried to find out where this quote comes from, but if you Google pain is like a balloon, you just get a lot of results for brain aneurysm symptoms. And I'm honestly not in the mood to go through that right now. But what she meant was it doesn't matter if your pain is the size of a fist or the size of a house. No matter if the balloon is only half filled with air or if it can't hold any more air, the balloon will always be as big as the air inside it. It doesn't matter if your balloon is bigger or smaller than other people's balloons. It's still your balloon. And it is all of your pain. And your pain deserves to be taken seriously and respected for itself. Just because other people are also having a rough time, it doesn't mean you don't have a right to take care of yourself or to ask for help. You don't have to earn being treated with decency and care, and you being treated with decency and care doesn't mean that others don't deserve to be treated that way either. Just because you have good things in your life, or because you've experienced joy, it doesn't mean your pain or your needs don't deserve to be addressed. You deserve to be treated with as much compassion as everyone else, because you're also a person. So don't let people scare you into hurting yourself by hurting others, and question how other people being able to live their lives safely and happily affects you. We don't need to be scared of other people asking to be treated right or be supported, because this never means we suddenly do not deserve support. So remember that you are always worth being taken care of, and also that trans people should always be able to play sports. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Click the link in the description and sign up today at incognito.com/Jessica using code Jessica for 60% off an annual plan. And I hope to see you in the next one.